One of the things I don't want to see many churches do anymore is constantly outreach without doing a little bit of internal processing and thinking about, are we inviting people to a burning building? Are we inviting people into a place where they can't properly connect because we're not properly connected with ourselves? This is something that I am not equipped to speak to. So in today's episode, I'm bringing on Matt Curtis, asking him the question, how does church health affect church growth? We've seen unhealthy churches grow, and we've seen healthy churches not grow. And what Matt presented to me was just a revelation. And so every time I talk to Matt, I think I say this in the interview, every time I talk to Matt, it's like there's a revelation. Like the Spirit only wants to speak to me through Matt. And I love my conversations with him. And this is a really, really good, solid conversation about how church health can really result in an evangelistic overflow into your community, making your marketing more effective, making your promotions more effective, making your guest return rates more effective. It's almost like to do proper outreach, you have to do a little bit of inreach and make sure you got your ducks in a row. So I'm very excited for that today. Today's value is outrageous vision. We want to make sure that we honor God, the outrageous God who calls us to co-author his redemption story with him. We're going to match that with outrageous thinking. Let's get into it today.
Welcome to the Best Known Church Show, where we show you how to 10x your reach with church marketing that will help you increase your impact, make more disciples, and become the cornerstone of your community again. This is for the leaders with an outrageous vision, because anything less would be an inaccurate reflection of our Creator. The ones who have unreasonable faith, because you know God works unreasonable miracles. And the ones who are relentless in the pursuit of your calling, because anything less would not make a good and faithful servant. If that's you, you're in the right place. Now, please welcome your host and guide on this journey to become the best known organization in your community, Justin Nava.
Welcome to the Best Known Church Show. My name is Justin Nava. If we have not met, I take full responsibility for that. In this episode, in this show in general, we're going to share ways that you can become the best known. Too many people are blind to their local churches. Too many people have just overlooked them so much, they're just ignoring by default. And if you're experiencing a revitalization, if God's given you a new vision or new leadership, and you need to break that barrier of preconceived notions, this show is going to help you do that. And I am really good at the marketing stuff. I'm not good at other stuff like words. I can lead a team, I can build a team, but when it comes to maintaining health, that's something that I feel more equipped to bring on an expert with. Matt Curtis is going to be on this episode. He's going to introduce himself in a second, but I want to prepare you to think about one thing before we go into that interview. As we reach out and bring people into our church, there's almost like a sixth sense. No, Bruce Willis, calm down. There's almost like a sixth sense, like when they walk in, there's a little bit of an unease that they can feel if your team leadership is not quite on par, on the same page. And especially when those things boil over. Unfortunately, a lot of pastors tell me about times when bad leadership or miscommunication boils over into an outburst, and guests get to see that. And so that's something that I don't want to have happen, especially as you're doing outreach. You want to reach your community. You want to make sure you bring them into a healthy home, especially if you're going to say something like welcome home. So Matt Curtis is going to share with us a little bit about how church health can actually impact your church growth. And as you strive to become the best known church, one of the ways that you can do that is being known for your leadership, for your team, for your care, your empathy, not only outwardly, but also inwardly as well. So let's get into this interview with Matt Curtis. So today on the show, I am happy to introduce Mr. Matt Curtis. Am I pronouncing that right? Matt? Is that
Yeah,
how you
I
say
know
it?
it's a tricky one. Yeah, but
Matt, for people who haven't met you, seen you, or heard about you, tell a little bit about who you are and what people can, what you do in life.
yeah. So my name's Matt Curtis, as mentioned. been serving in creative ministry since around 2002. Currently, what I'm doing is I help churches build healthy creative teams, healthy creative ministries, whether that be we want this, we feel the need for this. Um, so we're going to try to build a communications team from scratch, or we have this and it's kind of dysfunctional, or everyone's grumpy. We're struggling. So essentially, it's bridging that gap between the ministry of the church and the horsepower of creativity. So yeah, helping organizations leverage that well. There's a lot of different ways that that happens and a lot of different ways I go about doing that, but that's kind of the heartbeat of it.
What do you feel? Well, let me back up. So when I was on your podcast, had a great
Hmm.
time. Um, and I asked you to come on here because I thought just hearing you talk, man, you bring revelations. What's the is there a mirror of a prophet? Because I feel like when I talk to you, I get revelations that I don't. And it's not you so much giving me those revelations. It's
Sure.
just the way you speak makes me think in a way that I've never thought before. You help me out with scripts, with processes, with questions. We're in a couple chat groups together, and you're always a source of wisdom. So I wanted to bring you on the show. And one of the things that I asked was if a pastor was standing in front of you and he said, I just wish more people knew about my church. I wish they knew what good we could do. What would you tell them? And what did you tell me?
Yeah, my answer to that would be focus on the inside, like focus on the health of what's going on inside your church. I think that there's kind of it's almost like a pond ripple to me. And I think a lot of times we start at the outer ripples. We really want to dial those in. And the problem ultimately is that they always lead back to something. And the issue that I find is that a lot of churches are really attractive on that outer edge. But the closer you get, the more problems you discover, the more issues are there. And I think sometimes we discover that through the news. We see these kind of mega implosions. Sometimes it's just our own personal experience. We get closer to things and we realize, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. For me, the most impactful seasons of ministry are actually when our team, our staff, we were in a good spot spiritually. And I don't mean we were perfect. You know what I mean? Nobody's perfect. You're not going to achieve any of those types of things, but we were pursuing unity together. We were prioritizing the health of our relationships as a team, as a staff, as brothers and sisters in Christ. So that was when there was more fruit being produced. And so I think sometimes, I was thinking a lot about this, even in the midst of this conversation, because I've struggled for most of my career. I didn't want to work at a church. That wasn't my go-to. The only reason I worked at a church is because the skate company that I applied to went with somebody else. The college that I applied to said, we'll offer you a job, but we can fire you in 30 days and you don't get benefits. I was getting married in a month or two, and I was like, that doesn't feel very compelling in terms of an offer. The place that I got a job at, the tech company, it just they wouldn't disclose enough information, and so they didn't tell me about my benefits package until I was on staff already. Like, just there are all these weird scenarios. My future mother-in-law, it's like, well, there's this church that's hiring. I'm like, cool, super not interested. And it kind of brought me into this place really out of there were no other open doors. And what was really interesting to me is that there there was this temptation, I think, for us to chase the fruit rather than chase the developing the thing that bears fruit. And so in a way, kind of the joke in my mind was it's like I go out and plant a bunch of trees in my backyard, and then I go to the grocery store and buy a bunch of produce, and then I lay it down by all of the trees and I say, look how much fruit is being produced. Well, it's not being produced. We've kind of fabricated that fruit. So in a lot of ways for me, our focus is 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 backwards. And the reason I say that there's tension in that is because I'm a calm guy. Like, I'm supposed to be the hype machine. You know what I mean? Like, I'm the megaphone and saying like, hey, have we thought about having live animals stampeding through campus? Like, I don't know, just an idea. Have we thought about driving a car through the auditorium? Like, just an idea. Like, that's what I'm supposed to bring to the table. But I continually find that the more dialed in we are to the spiritual side, and when I say that, I don't even mean like the regiments reading our Bibles and did you guys offer communion enough times this quarter? Like not those things. Like what does our personal relationship as individual Christ followers look like? And then as a group of people on a church staff, whether that be paid staff, volunteers, whatever, are we pursuing God together? And I find that when we are, there tends to be more fruit. And when we're not, there tends not to be as much fruit. So for me, that's why I kind of go there in terms of the answer. I think that that's a little bit of the methodology that we see time and time again in scripture where God's talking about, the prayers of a faithful man. Like there's something about this faithfulness idea where God is showing up in the context of that. And it doesn't always look like we think it should. Think of Gideon. How about fewer people? Maybe go to battle with fewer. Whoa, hold on a second. I was reading through Nehemiah the other day, and the workers were rebuilding the wall with one hand because they had a sword in the other hand. Feels really inefficient. But at the end of the day, we have the benefit of seeing the end of these stories. God shows up in amazing ways. So it's a little bit of an unconventional response in the sense that, yeah, focus on how you're doing spiritually with God. And then as a leader of a team or as a staff, what are you doing to kind of cultivate and stimulate that growth within your staff team? Because truly that does radiate out beyond just that internal team.
When I like all of that. Two things come to mind, and I'm always thinking how the listener or the viewer might ask a question, a follow-up question. Two questions come to mind. I'll let you tackle them in the order you choose. Number one, how do we know when we're ready to start communicating if we're not in the spot healthily that we want to be? Because at the same time, we know we're never going to be perfect. So what's the balance?
Mhm.
Because I mean, you may plant the seed, but you got to go to the store and buy produce because you got to eat, right?
Yeah.
And then two, and this is more from a revitalization or planting process. How do you when you are I would say misconfigured on the inside,
Mm.
how do you find those people that will come and be the seed to be planted? So you're not just laying down a piece of cabbage on the floor, but like they're actually coming in to grow with you,
Yeah.
so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to the first question, I actually don't believe that you have to be ready in order to start. I think that it really is a refining process as you go. I think that one of the tensions is that we stall ourselves out by wanting to be more ready than we actually are. I think that the way that you get ready is by starting before you're ready. To me, it's very similar to training. If I want to run a marathon, I know I'm not ready. So I I don't start. No, that's not the right answer. We got to start somewhere. And in the starting, that's when I begin to realize how much further I have to go. Maybe I'm in better shape than I think I am. You know what I mean? Like maybe a marathon isn't as far away as I thought it was. Now, I know that's not true because long distance running has never been a friend of mine, even through sports and all those things. So,
And somehow
so
it
I,
is in my daughter, and I have no
yeah, yeah,
idea where she
yeah,
got that from.
right, yeah, right, yeah, yeah. My son at one point he would just sprint, like he just like run. My daughter was on a soccer team, and he would just run back and forth along the field, and I'm like, I don't understand where this came from, but it really is one of those things where I think so. One of the attributes I think is so important is humility, and humility looks like I'm going to lean into this before I'm ready. I think that that's an expression of humility. Is it's me saying I'm willing to put myself out there, even though I know that I may not be the best at whatever it is I'm doing. I may not be the best on camera. This may not be the best podcast I've ever recorded. Like the only way you get better is by starting. And part of the beauty of it is that when things don't work, you learn and you learn that they didn't work. And in some cases, you learn why they didn't work. People leaving your church can actually be super valuable and insightful. It can affirm what you're doing, even. Look, you guys just spend too much time engaging in God's word. We're looking for something different than that. Okay, see ya. Or you guys don't spend enough time engaging in God's word. We're looking for something different than that. I mean, that could be okay, we don't want to overemphasize certain things. Maybe that's your philosophy. I don't know. Or it could be, we really need to adjust. For me, the biggest tensions have come when those problems have been brought up and we've dismissed them. That's when I think you have a real problem. But you don't know that until you start trying. So that's how I would address the first. Does that feel sufficient?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the way you explain it, it's kind of like a pastor was like, "Hey, you go to church?" Like, no, I've been meaning to go back, but I got to get things right with Jesus or right
Yeah.
with God." And it's like,
Right.
all right, well, you're invited anyways, or you're gonna get that leg looked at. We use that what is it, illustration from the pulpit all the time, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
when you break your leg, you go to the hospital.
Yeah.
You
Right.
don't wait till it heals up, right? You don't try to splint it yourself. You're not
Yeah.
properly trained. So
Yeah.
that makes sense. I mean, if
Yeah.
things are not perfect in the middle, I like
Yeah.
your marathon
Yeah.
analogy too. It's like you don't realize just how far you have to go. Even yesterday, when I told my daughter, I was like, you have till 5 o'clock to clean your room, and then you get
Yeah.
this benefit. And she
Yeah.
wanted to go out on a walk with her brother. And I said, if you got to have your room done by 5. And I come out at 2:30 and she's practicing her school dance in the living room. And I'm like, you're supposed to be cleaning right now. She's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I've delegated my time. And I'm like,
Oh,
are you
interesting.
sure you can? So I go walk into her room at 5 o'clock on the dot, and she's sitting on the floor grabbing things from under her bed because she knows she has to clean under her bed.
Yeah.
And I said, how's it going? And she goes, bad. And I said, why? She's like, it's taking too long. And I
Funny.
said, twice as long as you thought? She's like,
Yeah.
yeah. I said, it's twice as hard as you thought? Yeah. I said, remember when I said clean your room? How long is it going to take? Plan for it to take twice as long as that. She's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, this is what it is. So she didn't get to go on a walk with her brother, but she will later this week.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of like you maybe you don't realize, you know, something's wrong. And maybe
Yeah.
you think you know what's wrong, but as soon as you start bringing people in, you start to find more of those cracks,
That's
or they
right.
find more of those cracks.
Yeah.
And you get
Well,
people
and
like me. I visited a church yesterday and I was like, this church is great, but I see some cracks that are preventing
right.
me from having a peaceful spirit of loving this church, or not even
Yeah.
loving this church. I wouldn't say that, belonging to this church or joining the
Sure.
church if I was seeking a membership kind of thing.
Yeah. When I think a piece of this is we have to behave in the way that we expect people to behave. And so there's this interesting, I'll say hypocrisy. It's not quite as dramatic. It's not a sinful type of a situation, but we say that people should be able to come into our churches before they're ready, like come as you are, and you don't have to restore your relationship with Jesus before you come to church. Like, let's partner in that. But we won't start things, or we won't communicate, or we won't begin moving in a direction until we're polished, until we're perfect. And so there's this interesting tension of your words are saying I'm welcome, but your behaviors are saying I'm not. And so there's something about this human imperfection that has to be made evident. And I'm not talking about flaunting sin from the stage. You know what I mean? Like this is we're just not perfect at everything. I'm not great at everything. I this week on my podcast, I had an episode about micromanagement. And one of the issues that a lot of people face is a boss who micromanages. As creatives, we get super angsty about it. But one of the things we have to realize, everyone's not good at delegation. It's a skill. Not everybody's good at all skills. So there comes a time where we need to offer a little bit of grace, recognizing other people aren't good at everything. And so similarly here, we're not good at everything, but in a sense, we kind of need to behave as if we know that we're not good at everything and that we're not perfect at everything. And I think there's something really powerful to that, because there becomes a humanity to the gathering of the people in the church that I think sometimes is excellenced away when we invest so much time polishing. And I mean, I see this with volunteer teams. It's nearly impossible for some churches to meaningfully engage volunteers. Why? Because they need a professional in every role. Okay, I mean, I guess that's a strategy, but it seems like you're missing out on something. And it seems like you're creating a context that's limiting for the group of people who are participating in your church. They're just not good enough to serve. And I know that's not the language we would ever use, but that's the behavior that we use. And so that's kind of that the inside has to match the outside. The thing I always go to, I know I'm the only person sitting there on a weekend who's like writing notes to himself, like, oh, I can't believe they did this. But one week you have the, Financial Peace University come and go to this class and get rid of debt. We know that debt is not something that God wants us to have, and yada yada. Next week, hey, we are so excited to announce we're taking out a $4.5 million loan to finish our whatever building. We are so excited for the work that God is going to do in this space. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, saying, wait a minute, I thought we weren't supposed to have debt. So you're saying you can have debt, but I can't because my debt will prohibit me from paying off your debt. Like, I don't understand. There's some weird connections that I'm making here. And I think the tension is a lot of people are making those connections. And it all stems back to, basically practice what you preach. If this is the message you're communicating, then behave that way. So yeah, so that's kind of
your
a piece
actions
of
have
it.
to match your values.
That's exactly
Is
right.
how
Yeah.
we say
Yeah.
it. Like if you
Yeah.
have a core value and you're not living it out, then you have this inner tension.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And you have an inner tension. Sometimes I think we're good at like ignoring that or kind of, whatever. But the issue is that many people outside of your church don't view it as a hidden tension. They view it as straight up hypocrisy or this doesn't make any sense. And I think that's the problem. If it's called out, that's one thing. But a lot of times the way it feels for us is dissonance. We step into a room, we hear a message, we hear an idea, and we think to ourselves, that doesn't sit right with me. I don't understand why necessarily. I can't pinpoint it, but it just doesn't feel right. And when that happens, we back away because it just doesn't, there's something off about this environment. And then it begins to kind of trigger a lot of these either defense mechanisms or doubts or, it lowers trust. We're like, I don't think I like it here. I'm out, I don't want to be a part of this. So I think that's a piece of where even that inward begins to reflect on the outward. And it's not like you ran a bad ad campaign. You had typos in your flyers. Like, it's not that kind of a thing. This is your heartbeat is being made evident. The out of the mouth, or out of the heart, the mouth speaks. That idea is coming to light a little bit.
Things I noticed in the last couple of weeks. I'm in a men's coaching program, health, business, relationships, uh, relationship with God. It's a whole holistic thing. And every Sunday we have to do a review of our week. And one thing I noticed, basically everything is done on a point system. Yeah, by the end of the week, you try to get to 28 points. A couple weeks ago, or maybe even the week before last, I had low, like 14, maybe even 13 points, like just bad. Last week, I had 25 points. So not perfect, but better. And what I realized looking between the two was a reflection of my nutrition and my daily spiritual disciplines, essentially
Yeah.
prayer,
Wow.
Bible, prayer before meals, stuff like that. Um, and what I wrote down in my journal was um, production follows um, nutrition and
Yeah.
discipline, essentially. Meaning,
Yeah.
like how well the business does um, follows how well I'm eating. I mean, that's just where we're at as a business. It's
Yeah.
just I'm still doing a lot of the work, so it relies on me. And if I eat poorly and I
Right.
sleep poorly, then I work poorly. So I get more upset and I eat poorly and I keep sleeping. It's like a cycle, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm getting my sleep, if I'm getting my nutrition, if I'm getting my sweat in, if I'm getting my prayer time in, if I'm relating with others and getting my minimum required introverted social time
Yeah.
in,
Barely enough.
um,
Yeah.
the day is just different. I can get
Yeah.
more done in an hour. I'm happier. I'm having better conversations and all that. So kind of along that, I think so often we get so focused, and me too, by the way, as a
For
marketing
sure.
guy, it's like, let's get all this stuff done. And in the meantime, I'm like, well, we still have this SOP that needs to be updated. It hasn't been touched. We've been doing something different since March. Actually, no, I guess it's been longer than March, but a couple months. We've been doing this thing, but it's not written down on our SOP. So if we onboard a new client, there's a chance we miss this new thing
Right.
that's going to miss another person. It's like getting my own stuff. This isn't a therapy session. We're going to get to a point here. I'm
It
getting
kind of
my own
is. Yeah.
stuff together uh, so I can serve other people better.
Right.
And so when I ask you, how does a church become better known?
Yeah.
You're more like my coach, where he's like, well, dude, you want to make more money, take better care of yourself.
Yeah.
You want to have a better relationship with your wife, sleep better. You'll be less
Yeah.
irritable, right?
Yep.
We don't necessarily correlate the two being together. And
Right.
instead, like you said, we try to say, well, if we promote ourselves in such a way, maybe we'll generate new excitement, bring in young blood. That young blood will excite our old blood, which will excite the wallet. I don't know, whatever the goals are.
Yeah.
Um, but how do you balance that with we have low attendance, people aren't excited, we have low giving. Let's improve our leadership health. Like, how do
Yeah.
you get the team on board with that?
Yeah.
Versus
I,
let's do this next book together and talk about it
sure.
at staff meetings.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of it is, I mean, it comes down to discipline. I think this is the part of the spiritual walk that is most difficult. It's not flashy. The results are barely visible day to day. The fact that you're even like tracking something and can see some sort of an impact of it is, I would say, very few people in life have that level of clarity in terms of the cause and effect type of relationship that exists there. And so a lot of it does come down to discipline. I think a lot of it also comes down to faith. I think we live in a culture where we are aggressively attacking the idea of faith. If I say to you, I want to move forward on a campaign this way, I got a gut feeling about this, or I believe that this will yield results, you'll get laughed out of the boardroom because you need to have data that's proving this kind of stuff. And what's fascinating to me, time and time again, the big successful campaigns, they come across as if they're gambles. And when they win big, then they are kind of data mined. And then it becomes, now this is the case study and this is the prototype for all successful things moving forward. And it's like, well, now hold on a second. Really, the prototype here was somebody trusted something. Now, I'm not saying that they were, that they had bad ideas that they just got lucky. Sometimes people are very good at making these sort of gut level, decisions. But I think one of the consequences that I'm seeing of that in the church, not in all churches, but in more than a couple churches, we'll put it that way. We really struggle with faith. We struggle with trusting that God is involved in the work that we're doing. I wrestle with this all the time as a business. Is my success as a business completely dependent on my ability to be successful as a business, or is God involved in provision? I don't like the idea of me being solely responsible for provision. I I feel like God can do a better job of that. And as I read through scripture, I'm encouraged that he cares about me, more than the sparrow, that, he's willing to adorn the lily with such ridiculous splendor, even though it lasts, a day or whatever. The tension though is, do I have faith that he'll provide? Because I'll be honest with you, every time I lean into that concept, I start doubting again. And I start thinking, well, maybe that's just me being lazy. Maybe that's me not having control of my metrics. Maybe that's my funnel's not working the way that it should. Like there's all these me control justifications that kind of surface in this. So I think the tension really comes down to, do you believe that God is actively working in your ministry? Do you believe that God will assemble for you and bring for you the group of people that he wants you to shepherd? Do you believe that that's who our God is and that that's what our God does? Because if we believe that, we can have a level of peace about sort of like the bare minimum that exists. And then all of our activity to reach others is now not for survival. Because I think that's the tension. Evangelism should never be for your bottom line. It's not. It shouldn't be to grow your church. It's not. God will bring the group of people that he has called you to minister to. Evangelism should be the overflow of us understanding the grace that he has given us. You're telling me, after all the things I've done, you're telling me this gap that I can't cross, you're telling me you did that for me. That should then be my motivation for evangelism. It shouldn't be, hey, the front row, it's pretty light this week. Think we can evangelize a couple more butts and seats? Like, so I think there's a little bit of a tension that I feel when I have some of these conversations. Is evangelism for the purpose of evangelism, or is it just advertising? And I have to caveat it because I know who I'm talking to. I see advertising as a major mechanism in evangelism. So for me, I think that's the thing is you can redeem things. You know what I mean? Advertising for me isn't crass advertising. No, it's part of my evangelism strategy. The issue is when we flip it, and evangelism is actually part of our advertising strategy.
Reminds me of a quote I heard just this morning, listening
Yes.
to Myron Golden, which not everyone agrees with. I understand. I don't agree with him on everything, but I think he's a great speaker and I try to learn a lot from him. Um, he said one of the things that the Israelites were doing in before they were out of Egypt, they were building, they were putting together the bricks for the kingdom that enslaved them. So they were enslaved and then they were building that kingdom that was enslaving them. And the question that came to my mind, I don't even think I tweeted it because I was like, I don't have a complete thought on this. But you kind of helped again revelate that to me. The Spirit speaks to me through you, Matt.
Love
Um,
it.
my thought was, well, how many pastors become enslaved to the institution of church?
Yeah.
How many church members become
Yeah.
enslaved to the institution of church? To the point where there is no outpouring of evangelism. There is only inpouring of institutional building and growth, to where you've got people, and I trust me, I know how the hypocritical this is going to sound, to the point where people have taken evangelism and discipleship and turned it
Yeah.
into a funnel itself.
Yep.
Right now, I use funnels, but that's not the discipleship strategy.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
I see these conferences and they're like, here's the funnel and here's the discipleship pathway, and I'm like, I get
Yeah.
it, I get what you're trying to say. I don't think you're communicating it the right way,
Yeah.
or at least strategizing the right way. How many times have even church members, not just pastors and leaders, but church members have become enslaved to the institution of church, where they think being Christian and being evangelistic is just inviting people to church
Right.
for the purpose of growing the church. And the
Yeah.
kingdom only grows if the church grows. Now, I'm not saying the church doesn't grow.
Yeah.
Um, so that makes total sense. It's like, I like to say advertising is in support of the word of mouth of
Hmm.
people sharing.
Yeah.
And that's why
Yeah.
our advertising, in fact, this morning, I was like, look, there's two ways we can go about it on this Facebook campaign we're about to build. We can do a prayer ad and get people connected to you one-on-one. I know life is hard. Let's pray about it. Or we
Mm.
can do an invite ad and get people coming to church. I said, it really depends on how your time, your bandwidth, and how relational and intentional you want to be and how that can scale up for you. Small
Yeah.
churches do great with the prayer ad. Large churches generally do better with the invite ad because they have the brand to
Right.
enhance the invite. And that's not, a lot of times that's accidental, but that's the way it is, right?
Yeah.
So all that to say, um, that makes a lot of sense that we need to kind of reevaluate the church that we're trying to get people to come into.
Yeah.
And advertising is not the invite. It doesn't replace word of mouth. I said that
Right.
a million times last year
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
conference
Yeah.
circus. Sometimes it feels like a circus.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Advertising and marketing doesn't replace the word of mouth invite. It enhances it.
Right.
People don't just go to the movies because they saw a commercial for it. Maybe if
Right.
it's in like like me, time travel, I'm there. I don't care what anyone says about it. If it's a
Yeah.
time travel movie, I'm there. I love time travel movies. Um, Other people, like, I won't go see a movie unless I'm told how amazing it is. Like, I would
Yeah.
not have thought to go see Godzilla minus one. It's an international film, low budget. It's just, I think it's Godzilla. I'm not a huge monster guy. I enjoy Godzilla movies, but I'm like, until I heard how amazing it was. And I went and saw it and it was amazing. It was
Huh.
awesome. They
That's
spent
great.
less money on a movie than they do on one episode of Disney TV
Oh,
shows.
wow.
And it
That's
was 10
amazing.
times better. And no amount of posters, internet ads, none of that got me there. It was people that I trusted telling me, and people that I listened to telling me, go see this movie. It's the best
Yeah.
movie of 2023. And so all that to say, the advertising doesn't replace that word of mouth. It doesn't replace the invite, and it definitely doesn't replace one-on-one discipleship,
Yeah.
but it does enhance it. It does plant the seeds. It is,
Yeah.
instead of relying on your, it's almost like instead of relying on your congregation to go out with
Hmm.
seeds to go plant, you've actually distributed those seeds and people are carrying them with them. And all your
Right.
disciples have to do is say, hey, that thing in your head, that thing in your mind, that thing in your hand, put that in the ground. This is where it goes. This is what it's all
Yeah.
about. So again, the first time someone hears about your church should not be from a word of mouth invite. It should be
Right.
because they've seen you, heard of you,
Right.
they've heard you mentioned.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it
in
just
a
makes
lot of
that
ways,
invite even easier.
yeah, in a lot of ways, they've encountered the fruit already. And I think
Yeah.
that's the thing is that if all you're doing is hold up in your little, empire, oh, we're great over here. You should come over here. We're great. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like, well, you're not coming over here, so I don't understand why I should. The grumpiest phrase that I came up with that was, we're telling, and this was in favor of online ministry, we're telling people that they need to come hear our message on our timeline, on our schedule, meaning Sunday morning, um, and on in our building. So like this whole like go part of it, like we're not doing any of that. If you want to hear a message that we say is important, you don't know it yet, so you don't agree that it's as important as we say it is. We're going to tell you that at 9 a.m. on Sunday. What? Huh? that's
Yeah.
that's the worst time to do anything. Um, you have to come to our room. I don't I'm, like this is so complicated and so difficult for me to like. There's so many hurdles that are being put up, and there's kind of a refusal for us to say no. We're going to go to you. We're going to bring it to you. And I think in a lot of ways the advertising only approach falls short for that reason. Ultimately there have to be people who are bringing the word to other people. And I don't mean like bringing a Bible, opening it up and reading it to them. I mean living a life that is in alignment with God's word as best they can, at least. And so now all of a sudden you do have this 1-2 punch. The thing we would always say is that if we ran a radio ad, that would be the catalyst for the conversation. Oh, you hear that? Oh, yeah, that's our church. That's our church I go to. You should come with me. Like all of a sudden now, it's a very low friction, natural interaction. Oh yeah, look, out in the outfield, my church sponsors this little league. That's cool. Like those are the kinds of things that become bridges. And essentially you're equipping the congregation to be able to have those conversations. Because I agree, it's really hard for an institution to win that battle because you're saying, come to a gathering of people. Well, shouldn't shouldn't people invite you to a gathering of people? Like it seems like that makes sense. So there's definitely that layer. And so I mean I agree. I think that being known is a critical component because it makes that conversation easier. To something that you mentioned earlier about inviting to church. The thing, I was at a church for a season, and man, they were invite to church heavy. And I remember thinking to myself, when I die and stand before God, he's not going to pull out this ledger and be like, all right, so how many did you invite to church? Is that how, because I got a number here. I just want, let's check our number. Like that's not the measure, And so I think sometimes we get lost in that. And I understand that that's an easy way to have that conversation, like from the pulpit to say, or from the stage, whatever, to say, look, invite your neighbor to church to join you next week. But there's a little nuance here where it's really invite people to Jesus. And sometimes that's you in the sense that you're the one having that conversation. It's introducing them to what Jesus teaches, the life that you're called to live as a Christ follower, the grace that he offers, the comfort that he offers. Those are some of those little pieces, catch a glimpse of Jesus, come on over to my house and let's watch the game together. Like there's little elements that we're drawing people toward. And that's really what inviting to the gathering should be. And so I think sometimes in our convenience or, desire for a quippy phrase, invite people to church. But the reality is that we're inviting them to something far more than that. And so I think um, when we drive that message of invite to church home too much, then we become, I don't know, I don't remember how you said it, if it was like enslaved to the institution or whatever, but like we're just so,
A very radical, what's the word I'm
yeah,
looking, extreme, a
yeah,
very
yeah, right, right,
extreme definition.
right, right. And I think what it unconsciously does for us is it makes us very defensive. It makes, and I mean, this is why you see so many like passionate camps. If I say, I don't think that you should have haze in the auditorium, a bunch of people just got furious right now. And other people are saying amen. Like, I'm like, okay, look, I just don't know if whatever that is, I don't know if it should be as polarizing as it is. But I think the root of it goes back to that. Look, I'm inviting somebody to this. So my reputation's on the line. It's like, hold on a second. That's not what the invite's about. The invite's not about you. It's about introducing a lost person to the savior of the universe, like to the savior of hopefully them, whatever, however you say that in a succinct way. But that, that's what's going on here. And I think So I think even in like in all of these things, I just think we lose that so often. I lose that in my business. Oh man, am I going to have enough money coming in this month or next month or 2 months, whatever, whatever the season determines. I'm so focused on the mechanics that I'm forgetting that the God of the universe knows me. He cares about me and he is involved and active in my life. Man, that brings a lot of peace. And, our church is small right now. Okay. God knows you. God knows your capacity. He knows that sometimes hard seasons are catalysts to growth for you. What if God's call to you isn't to escape difficulty as quickly as possible, but instead to go to Him and to grow and mature so that when your church is bigger, you're not going to be a bozo with it? Because I've seen a lot of people grow too quickly. It's not the best. I lamented this early in my career. I wanted to be higher up on the ladder than being a graphic designer or a comm director. I thought I could speak into leadership conversations. Man, I'll tell you what, the first time I stepped into leading our creative team, I did not like it. there was there was a shouting match in my cubicle on day one. And I remember looking back and thinking to myself, oh, I'm the one who's supposed to solve this problem now. Like it's a mess. But it was that season of not being in that position, the one I thought I could handle, not being in it is what prepared me to be able to be more effective when I was finally, put in that position. And so sometimes I think we're in a hurry to get out of growth-filled seasons. And I think it's a little bit of pay attention to what God's doing in the moment and how he's preparing what he had, how is he using what he has given you to prepare you for what may be coming down the road.
Let me land the plane here. Nelson Searcy says, I feel like I quote him every day now. A funny thing happens when a church prepares to receive guests.
Mm,
God sends them more guests.
yeah. Yeah.
What would you say something similar? A funny thing happens when a team starts to turn inwards to examine and look at their health. What would you say can be the result of that? What would you see?
I think that when you get healthy, you become a catalyst to health in the world around you. I think that more unhealthy people will look to you and they will be inspired by what you are. They'll be confused by the fact that that's how life can be, and they'll want to know more. What happened? What did you do, or what did you go through, or how did you get to this place? Um, Early in my wife and I's marriage, we were, I think the job title was spiritual life mentor couples for emancipated youth who had graduated out of a foster care system. So essentially what happens is they're in foster care, they hit 18, and it's like, congratulations, you're on your own. And they're like, what? Like, I don't know how to do anything, because the foster care system is heavily governed in terms of basic responsibilities, even. Like, they couldn't get a Tylenol without a nurse being involved. So now they have a headache at 18 years and 1 day, and they're like, but I don't have a nurse anymore. Like, all of a sudden, they're just kind of stranded. And so it was in an apartment complex, and there are a bunch of different people. So my background, I grew up in a home where my dad was a Bible professor. He taught at Biola University and Talbot Seminary. And like, that was it. That was my life. My wife has a different background, and there were more difficulties with health challenges that she had over the years. And so we thought, walking into this, Matt will be the weird normal guy that nobody can relate to. And my wife would be the one who has much more relatable experiences in life because she's gone through some pretty significant hardships health wise. Well, it wasn't the exact opposite, but I found that the guys gravitated toward me. And in a lot of ways, the conversation was like that. They're like, I don't understand. Like everything seems like it's stable and normal. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, I guess. Like, I don't know. Like, I didn't know how to put words on it at that point in my life. But I think it's one of those things where it it puts you in a position to be seen as somebody. The phrase that I use, this is one of my values as a business, leave a wake of restoration. I want everything behind me to be healthier because I was participating in it on some level. So that means that I'm going into organizations that are dysfunctional, and they're dysfunctional in a lot of different ways. But my hope is that after I leave, are working together, they have picked up some habits, some behaviors, some systems, some processes, strategies, whatever it is. They're now better able to function in a healthier way. And so I think that when you become healthier as a staff team, and I don't just mean healthier, like you can all work out, that's fine. Like I don't, I'm really meaning like when you are really focused on your walk with God and growing in him and enjoying the relationship that we have with the creator of the universe, when that's where you are, people who need that will gravitate toward you. I just believe that that's the way that God has established all of this. The faithful people, the ones who are actively in relationship with one or with him, those are the ones that God tends to draw people who need him to. And then that conversation happens. I'm always reminded of John Piper, and I think of how like ridiculously giddy he gets when he's talking about things. And I'll be honest with you, there are times where like I'm in a funk, you know, I'm just down for some reason, and I just need him to talk for 5 minutes while giggling and flailing his arms about a Greek word. And what it does is that joy draws me to him, but not because he's the destination, but because he reminds me of where his joy comes from. But it's an example of him being disciplined. It's a weird statement, disciplined in the participation or the embracing of the joy that we can find in our relationship with God. So I think that that just kind of turns us into a magnet. So that's why I even recommend that, or, you know, kind of say that as a mechanism for having our churches grow in their impact. Because when we become a certain thing, others that need what we've become, they want to go there to find that.
I love that. And if you had said giddy pastor, John Piper would have not have been on the on the top of that list. I'm just going
Yeah,
to
sure,
say.
sure.
But as
Yeah, yeah,
soon
yeah.
as you said
Yeah,
Piper gets giddy, I'm like,
yeah,
I know exactly what he's talking about. I know
yeah.
exactly what he's talking about. So let me wrap up with this. I'm going to say this as nicely as I can. With all due respect, nothing ever goes past that. Nothing ever good follows that. With all due respect, Matt, you look great
Yeah.
today. Um, this sounds like you go to Bible college and your first classes are English, math, science, whatever. Or you're like, I'm gonna get a six-pack abs, and you hire a coach and he's like, stop eating chocolate and Skittles and like don't you're not gonna do sit-ups for 6 months because you just gotta eat right. And it's like, or when clients come to me and they're like, we want to run Facebook ads, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you need messaging first because you don't even
Yeah.
know what you're saying. Like you're communicating something that's not you. So this sounds great, Matt. But when people are generally focused on, we want to get more of the community into our church to hear the gospel, when you say, okay, great, let's work on you first, it sounds like the beginning of a movie. Like it sounds like, I don't know, I feel like there's been a bunch of movies where they're like, I want to do this. And the
Yeah.
guide, the Obi-Wan is like, well, first you must look inward.
Yeah.
Um, but then, I mean, to me, that makes sense. I hope that makes sense to all of us. So
Yeah.
if a pastor's or church leader is listening to this, watching this, especially church communicators, because that's Matt's bread and butter, and they want to learn more, where can they follow up with you on?
Yeah, the easiest way is lunchtimeheroes.co. There's no M, just .co. I always have to call it out. The other domain was taken by Hawaiian bread, but lunchtimeheroes.co. One thing I'll say
But
though,
you looked at the expiration date and you put it in your
oh
calendar,
yeah,
right? So you could
it's
try
on my
to.
calendar. Yeah, 100%.
Okay,
I
good,
actually
good.
think it's 2 days from when we're recording right now. I have to double
Okay,
check,
good.
but
This won't go out for a week, so they
yeah,
won't know.
perfect. So we're fine. We're fine. One thing though, I want to caveat. I wouldn't say focus on you instead. I would say focus on you as well, because I think that's the tension. The tension is that we're not holistically looking at these things. And so I can have a killer ad campaign for a garbage event. Your event needs to be better. I can have a terrible ad campaign for an amazing event. Your ad campaign needs to be better. And so sometimes what we do is we look at one problem, but we don't acknowledge that there's work, holistic work that can be done as we move forward. So that's really the encouragement, is just don't neglect that. Don't become so focused on the external that you lose the focus on the internal. So that's my big caveat.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Matt. Lunchtimeheroes.co. What is up with that
My
name?
pleasure.
I can
It's always
finally
fun to
ask
chat.
you. What is up with
Yeah. Okay. So,
lunchtimeheroes.co? That does not scream Matt Curtis
yep.
communications health.
Yeah. So there was a study done, and I think it was I want to say it was in the 70s. That might be choice overload, but whatever. There was a study done. I can give you a link to it. But it basically was looking at, are we more productive when we when we work through our lunch hour? And so the study showed, it compared, working through lunch. You think that's an extra hour in your day. Of course, I'm more productive versus taking, that full lunch break to really disengage, go off campus, whatever. And they showed that you were more productive when you took that break. And so for me, one of the main indicators that there's something broken in your systems and in your culture as an organization is when you don't have time for lunch. And so to be a lunchtime hero is actually somebody who defends the lunch hour and builds systems and processes that allows them to be able to maintain that balance and that health, because at the end of the day, it actually contributes to more effort and energy invested in a meaningful way toward the mission you're trying to accomplish as a church. So it does.
That makes sense. I can appreciate
sort of
that.
connect.
I found that I run out of gas when I basically work up until sleep.
Yep.
So now about an hour before bedtime, it's just daddy time. It's
Yeah, that's right.
video games, comics, books, or my stupid mobile Marvel Snap game.
Yep.
Like it's just, and I wake up feeling better and I can
Right.
get through the day. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Matt.
Yeah, anytime.
I love how Matt puts it. He puts it so clearly, right? We need to take a look at our health inside before we can start. Well, I wouldn't even say before, but as we look at the health of our community. So often it's almost like the guy that starts a diet and before he's lost 10 pounds, he starts telling you how you should eat. One of the core values of this men's coaching group that I mentioned is take care of yourself first. That's how you take care of your brother. You got to put your own mask on first before you can take someone else out, before you can help someone else out. So thank you for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe. Let me know what you thought of this episode. It was a little more conversational, a little less, hey, Matt, teach us the 5 things churches need to know. It's just, let's just have a good conversation. I'm finding that I'm learning better through those kinds of conversational dialogues rather than another webinar, another training, another masterclass. We've got enough of those. So maybe if that resonated with you more, let me know. I'll put a poll in the Spotify feed as well. Wherever you are, like, follow, subscribe so you can get the latest episode drops. Next month, we're going to start looking at some website enhancements churches can make. We're looking specifically at 2024. There's a lot of things that websites can do now that they weren't even able to do last year. And if you do what I'm going to show you next month, I'm going to show you the exact plan that we use. It's going to help enhance people staying on your website longer. It's going to help and get them taking action. They're not going to be looking at a whole menu of everything and getting overwhelmed and leaving. We're going to show you how to guide people, similar to how you guide your first-time guests from the front door to the nursery to the pews. I'm going to show you how to guide your guests, make a fantastic first impression, and guide them to take an action that you want them to take. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below, what you thought of Matt, and you can go find him at lunchtimeheroes.co. God bless, and I'll see y'all next week.
That's going to do it for today's episode of the Best Known Church Show with Justin Nava. Be sure to subscribe to stay updated on the latest news, strategies, and resources that you need to reach 10x more people and become the best known in your community. To send us a message or leave a voicemail for Justin to be played on a future show, visit thebestknownchurchshow.com. And if you'd like to work with us so you can focus on your ministry, give us a call at 832-861-7654. Until next time, stay outrageous, unreasonable, and relentless.